It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and John Daigle.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. This is the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast. We are, of course, presented by DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. Most of you know that. Lets me do all this different football media stuff. Saturday at noon, Wake Forest at UConn for CBS Sports Network. And then Sunday night, pretty good timing to be in the booth for Westwood One for the Jets at the Steelers. Just a little bit to talk about in that game as the Jets now have Devontae Adams and the Steelers might, I repeat, might have a new quarterback, which seems weird, but I guess it's a distinct possibility. Absolutely love this show because of my new guy, Johnny D, John Daigle from EstablishTheRun.com. He is fantastic. Their website is fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. EstablishTheRun.com. Use the code FEAST so you get a discount from us for all of your fantasy information for the rest of the year. But honestly, it's more than that. Like prop bets, all kinds of stuff. Even, I tell people all the time, even if you're not in a fantasy, you should listen to this show or watch youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL because John is an absolute fountain of information. I take so many notes on the things he says every week. Some of the best numbers, stats, info in the business. Really interesting way to look at these games. It is awesome. Check him out on social at NotJDaigle. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. As a reminder, it's the show that's so nice we only do it twice. It is 2 about 25-minute episodes. We record them both Wednesday, drop one Wednesday, drop one Thursday. So in about 50 minutes, you will know basically about anybody that's fantasy relevant in every NFL game this weekend. Starting, John, with Thursday night with a lot of injury situations in this Broncos-Saints matchup.
I don't think I've ever told you this on the pod before, but I like the Broncos in this spot. For as good as Spencer Rattler looked in his debut, this is a nightmare situation for the Saints. It's not only a fifth-round rookie quarterback making his second career start on the first short week of his career, but it looks as if he's also going to have his third-string center and backup right guard protecting him. Not only that, but both Chris Olave in the league's concussion protocol currently and Rashid Shaheed dealing with a knee injury also seem like they're not going to play. So although we talked about Spencer Rattler having an advantageous situation against that poor Bucs secondary and doing well for fantasy as a top 24 quarterback last week, this is not a game, even without Pat Surtain, who looks like he himself is going to miss this one, and the concussion protocol too. This is not a game where I'm excited to start Spencer Rattler. The only player really outside of Alvin Kamara that I'm looking to tack on is 6th-round rookie Bub Memes. Because oddly enough, whenever Olave exited the game in the first quarter against the Bucs last week, for the rest of the other 3 quarters, Bub Memes tied Alvin Kamara with a team-high 8 targets. I don't know if it's the rapport those two developed in the preseason and just in backup reps together, but it seems like Rattler and Means have something together. So that's as far as I'm willing to go in terms of picking up someone off the waiver wire and streaming them against the Broncos this week. I already told you, though, on the other side of the ball, I like the Broncos situation because quietly, I don't think anyone has noticed, the Saints defense has been on the field for over 150 plays the last 2 games. And now have to turn around for a Thursday game against a team that wants to be smash mouth, that wants to run the ball. And so I do think the Broncos can just slowly wear down New Orleans and win this one out right here. Not only that, but Bo Nix has now unbeknowingly to a lot of people, rattled off back-to-back top 10 finishes for fantasy because of the mobility he's adding. 6.5 weekly rushing points the last 2 weeks, including 6 rushing points per game on the entire season. Also, since week 2, the Saints defense, because it's not just their offense, their defense is also banged up throughout. They've just been leaking 300 yards per game through the air since week 2. So all that leads me to say that I believe it is a great situation, probably for the first time all year, for the Broncos offense. Also, for your deeper 12-team and 14-team leagues in fantasy, I think we've seen that Nix has also developed something with rookie Devon Vele. 12 catches in his first 2 NFL games. He was only available in week 1 and week 6, but 18 and 19% target share as well. So look out for Vele on waiver wires too.
So that's kind of the information I love. You know, I didn't realize over 150 snaps for the Saints defense the last 2 games. That's a lot in the NFL. That's more like college numbers. And now they got to go on a short week. That is less than ideal. What about the London game where we've got the the Jaguars and the Patriots? Wow, that is not exactly our greatest export ever over to London. Good luck, Jaguars, Patriots. But at least the Patriots have your DraftKings value pick this week, presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Somehow, my DraftKings value pick of the week is coming out of this game in London, and it's because I'm excited about the Patriots offense, something I haven't told you all year. If you include Caleb Williams' 4-touchdown performance as the overall QB1 against Jacksonville last week, you can then step back and see that every quarterback, Deshaun Watson included, to face Jacksonville this year has finished as a top 12 option that week. Not only that, but because Drake May, what he showed at North Carolina and then in his first start with 5 carries, that profiles similarly to the last month, like a Josh Allen and Caleb Williams, who also put up 44 and 56 rushing yards against Jacksonville too. I know people may be concerned about May because of the New England's pocket and the pass protection, but actually, and I attribute this to his mobility, even though the Texans had generated the league's 3rd highest rate of pressure going into that game against New England last week, May was under pressure at the lowest rate, 33% of any Patriots quarterback this year in any game. Because, again, I believe just being able to extend the play, get out, create his own yards outside of the pocket certainly helps matters. So this Jacksonville defense, unlike Houston's pass rush, is creating pressure at the 20th highest rate. I think it's going to be a very soft spot and a great game for May to start him in fantasy this week. And if you do that, the trickle down I think he's found in his favorite receiver is Demario Douglas, because similar to how Josh Downs had 100 targets from Drake May at North Carolina in 2022, and then in 2023, Nate McCollum and Brian Nesmith combined for over 120 targets from the slot, that seems to be where May prefers to throw the ball. Of course, Douglas just led the Patriots in slot routes last week. And so if that's the case, there's also no one coming right now or competing for Douglas's targets. I do think Kendrick Bourne, who remember before he tore his ACL last year, was the wide receiver 27 in fantasy. I do think he eventually comes on, but he's only played 2 games so far. He's being eased back in, just 52% of the team snaps last week. So May Douglas seems to be the connection to love in fantasy right now.
Love it. What about when the Jags have the ball?
It's a complete mess right now, admittedly. Evan Ingram returned to the same role he had last year, a team-high 28.5% target share, and at least the passing offense from Trevor Lawrence became condensed, where it was Gabe Davis with 8 targets, and then behind him, Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas with 6 targets apiece. The Jags also left 3 drop touchdowns on the board. If no one woke up to watch that game last week, I don't blame you, but it wasn't Trevor Lawrence's fault. Brian Thomas and Kirk in particular just had 2 wide open should-be touchdowns in the end zone that they just bobbled away. It gets really hard for Jacksonville. So if we think the Patriots in May can continue to push Jacksonville's offense, we at least know the guys we're looking to start in Kirk, Thomas, Gabe Davis to a lesser extent, and then Evan Ingram back in our lives as a top 12 tight end. For the running backs, I quickly want to mention that Tank Bigsby unfortunately does not have the ceiling that we initially thought, because Travis Etienne got banged up with a hamstring injury for the third consecutive game, dealing with something. Prior to that, it was a shoulder injury. And we thought, because of how good Tank Bigsby has looked at times this year, that he was just going to step into an every down role. But that wasn't the case at all. Journeyman Dearness Johnson came in and instead was used similar to Etienne as the team's pass-catching back. And now if we zoom out and look at Bigsby's usage behind the scenes, he hasn't run more than 8 routes in any game this year. I think if Etienne's out, they truly do want to use Dearness as their receiving back, which limits Tank Bigsby's floor and ceiling if he's not getting targets and catches. So I worry about Bigsby a little bit. You're still jamming him in there as a RB2, RB3, but it does seem like Dearness may have some 14-team PPR value more than expected.
Let's talk Falcons and Seahawks, John.
Geno Smith now, at least we know in the last 5 games he's played Raheem Morris's defense. That was, of course, Seattle playing the Rams. It's not apples to apples, I know, but he only threw for multiple touchdowns in one of those 5 games. Morris had his number the last couple of years, so I am a bit concerned about Seattle's passing attack in this one. It's also been frustrating for DK Metcalf's managers because as good as he's looked on tape, and he's left a couple of big plays on the field that some of them weren't even his fault, a big 50-yard DPI last week as well. What's happening is that under offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, the ball is spread out. Whereas the last 2 years, DK Metcalf was top 5 in both seasons in end zone targets. That's where they went to whenever they threw the ball in the paint. This year, it's spread out completely. He's still leading the team with 5 end zone targets, but Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett also have 4 apiece. And so that's why DK Metcalf's only 2 touchdowns this year have come from outside the red zone, because they've just been big, explosive 40-yard catches. And it seems like we're going to have to rely on those big plays, at least at this time, for him to get there in the box score with a touchdown. So you're still starting him every week, but maybe a little bit more inconsistent than we initially thought. Who it has not been inconsistent for is Kenneth Walker. Because unlike his usage under Shane Waldron for 2 seasons, where he only saw a 6.8% target share, this dude doesn't come off the field under Grubb. 14.5% target share, and in his last 3 games since he returned from injury, Kenneth Walker has totaled 4, 7, and 8 catches. It's the best usage possible you could imagine for a fantasy running back. So, love having Kenneth Walker as a top 12 running back the rest of the season because his floor is higher than ever in 3 seasons in the league.
What about the Falcons and their red-hot offense?
Red hot because I think they found something in balancing their powerful offensive line with 2, not 1, as much as we would love to say Bijan Robinson should be in every touchback, 2 running backs in Tyler Algier, who has given no reason to come off the field and has looked great, including just last week with over 100 yards and a touchdown. In their last 3 games together, it has truly been a 55-45 split in favor of Bijan Robinson. But also, Algier, because again, he's good, has outcarried Bijan 3-1 inside the 5-yard line. And I think it will continue to be a timeshare in this one. And I believe both can get there. Because, like a lot of teams right now, Seattle is just so injured in their front 7, including continuing to miss first-round defensive tackle Byron Murphy, that just look at the last few games when they've been asked to defend the run. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery totaled 110 yards and 3 touchdowns against them. Tyrone Tracy in his first career start, 18 carries for 129 yards. And then just last week on primetime that we all watched, both Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerrero averaged over 9 yards per carry. So I think both Bijan and Algier can continue to get there in this game. And then, of course, we know that in order to attack Seattle's secondary, you avoid the boundary. You don't go anywhere near Devin Witherspoon or Tariq Woolen if you can. And since week 2, the person who has been avoiding out wide has been Drake London. And his slot rate just continues to increase weekly. And that's why since week 2, London has been the wide receiver 7 in points per game. So I think we at least have a clear funnel of where to go to in the Falcons attack as well.
Okay. Well, let's get to the next game. It's the Titans and the Bills. You know me, John, when I think Bills, I think delicious Labatt Blue Light because you can always enjoy it responsibly. It is delicious beer made by Labatt USA in Buffalo, New York. So while you're watching the game Sunday, enjoy some Labatt Blue Lights with friends and family, living life to the power of we. Titans, Bills, John.
I think Duff and Labatt Blue, but sure, that's fine. I will say it's been frustrating, everyone knows, for the Titans offense. Calvin Ridley even coming out and voicing those frustrations after the game, after he didn't see a single target in the first half, only one carry against a Colts secondary that was not only injured, but just has been giving it up to every quarterback prior to Will Levis, who finished with only 95 passing yards and his 7th interception already of the year. And remember, the Titans have been on bye, so there's really no excuse to already have 7 interceptions. But the struggle's really coming in how the Titans are using, and Brian Callahan, Calvin Ridley. 18 air yards per target, and those deep shots are from Levis, so they're not exactly a beacon of accuracy. So it's hard for those targets to then amount to fantasy points, and that's what's happening right now. The only player, admittedly, you can trust is Tony Pollard, because after Tajay Spears suffered his hamstring injury, week-to-week status, it seems like he's going to be out, at least for this game, against what has been a Bills defense that leaks explosive plays. Even entered that game on Monday night against the Jets, allowing a league-high 5.2 yards per carry, and then Breece Hall, of course, runs wild for over 100 yards. Tony Pollard handled all but one touch for the rest of the game among the Titans running backs once Tajay Spears got injured. Only Julius Chestnut behind him. So love Pollard in this game, despite what seems to be, at least on paper, a daunting Bills rush defense. I think Pollard is probably a top 12 play at running back this week. On the other side of the ball for Buffalo, I know what everyone wants to talk about. It's the Amari Cooper trade that certainly helps them out. Keon Coleman to this point, and this was always the concern with his profile coming out of college, fun kid, still rooting for him, but 2024 NFL doesn't really allow for receivers to come in who have struggled to separate and lived off contested catches like Coleman did at 2 different programs in college. And I think that's why Coleman has struggled with outreaching 55 receiving yards in any game this year, because he's really just dependent on deep shots and contested catches. Cooper doesn't do that. Amari Cooper separates at will, and he gets those targets underneath. So it's not exactly as if Coleman is dead for fantasy, but I think at least he's just going to continue relying on those deep shots, which makes him even more volatile moving forward for Cooper, who is absolutely going to lead this team in targets the rest of the way. He's a flex play, in my opinion, in this game, because unlike another veteran receiver who got traded, who we'll talk about, Cooper still has to learn the playbook. He has a lot to learn from Josh Allen. The rapport just isn't there. So I bet he's eased in on 50% of the snaps. But you should be very excited if you have Amari Cooper in fantasy right now. In the backfield, too, we'll wait it out and see James Cook's status, but at least we know out of nowhere that the Bills' offense trusts Ray Davis, the rookie, who averaged an 11% target share, 2.5 catches per game at Kentucky as a strong receiving back. The coaching staff completely trust him. 85% of the team's backfield touches without James Cook on Monday night. Also had that deep catch from Allen where Davis just fought through coverage 20 yards downfield and came back to catch it. So I believe McDermott loves Ray Davis if James Cook is out again.
Yeah, he looked good. Really good. What about Bengals at the Browns? Sounds like Nick Chubb will be back for the Amari Cooper-less Browns.
And although there wasn't an explosive performance for the Giants running backs last week, the Bengals are still a defense we attack on the ground. And given how poor Watson has played this year, I think that's what the Browns lean into immediately. Nick Chubb obviously knows the offense, knows he can get dropped in and get carries immediately. So while running backs coming back from injury are typically concerning, I just think that's the Browns offense, especially in this one. So I like Nick Chubb immediately as a top 24, top 36 option. You can start him, especially if you have one of the Bears or Cowboys players on bye weeks in your flex. And then from there, Jerry Jeudy, we'll see what the fallout is without Amari Cooper. And it's already been a struggle for Amari Cooper to get there despite leading the team in targets. But at least we know that Jerry Jeudy has averaged 6 targets per game. Perhaps he's the one that gets the bump. David Njoku also a top 12 tight end outlook for the rest of the season. But again, we're going to have just wait and see how the target tree shifts out between Deshaun Watson and everyone else. On the other side of the ball is where I'm most interested, because The Browns, although we have respect for a lot of their superstars in their defense, they have been prone to leaking big plays this year. And so far, although Jamar Chase the last 3 seasons from Joe Burrow had previously dominated T. Higgins in target share, this year it's not the case. In their 4 games together, T. Higgins has earned 37 targets to Jamar Chase's 31. T. Higgins is a weekly low-end wide receiver 1, if not fringe option, because he just continues to earn all the targets in the world alongside Chase, as opposed to being thrown on the back burner this year. I also think there may be a change of the guard at running back, because after Zach Moss fumbled on the opening drive in the 3rd quarter against the Giants last week, from that point forward, Chase Brown out-touched Zach Moss 7-0. And that includes Chase Brown's fumble he had in the 4th quarter. All the team did was go right back to him for that game-winning touchdown to ice the game, where he did try to slide, but he slid too late. He slid in the end zone. So I think, based on that performance in the second half, that we could see Chase Brown handle double-digit touches and be commanding this backfield for the first time all year over Zach Moss.
Let's get to a juicy matchup. It's the Texans at the Packers.
An interesting one, because for the Packers, we have more shifts at their wide receivers. Christian Watson emerged after Dontavian Wicks was injured in the 1st quarter, and Watson then went on to not only score the touchdown, but he was targeted on 22% of his routes, far more than Romeo Doubs, who was targeted on just 16% of his routes. And it's funny because although Dobbs finishes the wide receiver 9 on the week, had 2 touchdowns, it was actually his lowest target share, 12.9%, in any of his 3 starts with Jordan Love this year. So I believe, assuming Wicks is out, dealing with that injury, a week-to-week status, I believe Watson is the player to roster and start over Dobbs as long as Wicks remains out. That's the player I'm most interested in on waiver wires. For the other side of the ball, too, the return of Joe Mixon, and without Nico Collins. And the Texans and OC Bobby Slowick just continued leaning into the run. And now, in his only full 2 games played this year, Joe Mixon, 26.8 fantasy points and 27.2, an RB1. Not only that, but they practically got to ease him in since the game was pretty much a blowout in the first half. Joe Mixon out-touched Dameon Pierce 12-3. And then only then in the 3rd and 4th quarter, whenever they built this 2-3 score lead, only then did Cam Akers and Dario Gumbawale come in to finish off the game. This is Joe Mixon's backfield, with no one else touching the ball as long as he's healthy. And against this Packers front 7, who we continue to attack with running backs, Joe Mixon very clearly a top 6 running back this week. It was also very encouraging, Ross, to finally get Tank Dell back in our lives, because that's who Slowick asked to step up and put him in place in their first game, which seems like it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks, without Nico Collins. A route on 94% of dropbacks for Tank Dell for a team-high 30% target share, and finally, 18.5 fantasy points. So we are going right back to Tank Dell as a wide receiver 2 or 3, at least in every game that Nico Collins remains out.
And then on the other side, when the Packers have the ball?
I believe it is going to be Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, especially with Wicks out. I know Tucker Kraft didn't exactly pop in the box score last week, but that's kind of the thing with the Packers. Although the Texans are getting pressure, the Packers spread it out to everyone. And so it's really impossible to get a condensed target share. It is still a tougher matchup for Josh Jacobs, but just given his early down usage, it's not really a situation we ever talk about because you're continuing to start Josh Jacobs weekly.
Love it. Absolutely love talking with my guy, John Daigle, on the Fantasy Feast podcast each and every week. The show that's so nice, we do it twice. Check him out on social media like I do, at NotJDaigle. You can check me out at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. I already have a bunch of notes down. Amari Cooper, Drake May, as well as you loving the Broncos in a certain spot, which is absolutely awesome. As a reminder, people can also check out the Even Money Betting podcast if you're interested in that. That's another great show to listen to or watch, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Anytime you want to see or listen or watch the NFL from a different angle, it is very, very fun to do so. College Draft Podcast as well. I love football. I love tailgating. I love that you guys get to tailgate a lot more than I do with Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka and an official vodka partner of the NFL. It's an experience that is best enjoyed together. How about this? Smirnoff is giving fans in select areas of the country a chance to win the ultimate game day experience. Tickets, sideline passes, much more. Head to WeDoGameDays.com until November 15th. WeDoGameDays.com. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age. No purchase necessary. 21 plus. Ends 11/15/24. See rules at website for participating area and other important details. Sponsored by Diageo Americas Incorporated, New York, New York. John, let's get to one more game. Let's get to, it's the Dolphins and the Colts. Your thoughts on Miami and Indy?
The issue in always doing this show on Wednesday with you is that sometimes we don't know the quarterbacks. And right now, we are left in flux between, once again, Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco. I think it's been a win-win situation for the Colts, honestly, because Joe Flacco has played great, but not good enough to where, unlike his stint in Cleveland, that everyone wanted to cheer on Flacco until he was starting over Deshaun Watson. It's been good enough and getting by with a 1-1 record that the team still has all the reason in the world to bring back and develop Anthony Richardson. And that might happen as early as this one, as the Dolphins return from their bye and get a little bit healthier. We are still waiting out the big Devon Achane news as well, since he suffered a scary concussion before the bye. And we've seen, at least with Malik Neighbors, that can linger this year whenever you're hit that hard. So we'll find out about Devon Achane's status soon enough. We know, though, regardless, we always want to play our players against the Colts defense that is also bringing more secondary injuries into this one. And if that's the case, not only Raheem Mostert, and maybe Mostert was dropped on waiver wires somewhere, so perhaps everyone should go look right now to pick him up. But I think really the sneaky play here is Jalen Wright, the explosive rookie, because he had really struggled, just 3.3 yards per carry in the first few games. But without Achane, he stepped into Achane's role. It's like as if he struggled to replace Mostert in that time, but without Achane, back to over 5.5 yards per carry, which is what we expect from someone with his explosive profile. So I believe Wright is a very sneaky running back to pick up this week and start against the Colts front seven. And for the Colts, we don't know who a quarterback is yet, but we know who the wide receiver is every single week to run it back with, and that's Josh Downs. Not only looks great on film, but even last week, a season-low target share, but that season-low number was 25%. Just getting hammered with all the opportunity. So Josh Downs, the receiver to trust even over Michael Pittman.
I love it, John. Great stuff. I am stuffed. Great stuff. I'm stuffed. Get it? Ready for episode number 2.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.